Glass slipped from my fingers. It didn't shatter. Just hit the plush carpet with a dull thud, the kind of sound that didn't draw attention. Unlike my mother's words, which rang through the banquet hall with absolute clarity. "She's the only one who never achieved anything," she said, beaming like she'd just announced a Nobel Prize winner. But at least she showed up. "Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin." A ripple of polite laughter spread across the room. My uncles chuckled. A few coworkers exchanged glances. My cousin Brittany smirked while whispering something into her fiancé's ear. I stood there, smiling. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it used to hurt. Not anymore. I reached down, picked up the empty glass, and placed it neatly on a nearby tray. My mother turned her back to me, her sparkling dress shimmering under the chandelier light, her voice now projecting loud gratitude to my older brother, Blake, for carrying the family legacy. He gave her a fake modest shrug, squeezing his wife's waist like he'd won a trophy. I didn't correct her. Not about Blake's debt, or his failed real estate ventures, or the fact that the only reason my parents still had their house was because of the silent wire transfers made every month under my LLC. No. Tonight wasn't for confrontation. Tonight was for revelation. I walked over to the far end of the room, past old colleagues of hers I vaguely recognized from my childhood. I smiled, said hi, and let them keep assuming I was the jobless daughter who never made anything of herself. I stopped near the entrance, where the noise of clinking glasses dulled slightly. That's when I saw him. Ethan. My husband. He was late, but not by accident. He never did anything by accident. He adjusted his tailored black suit as he stepped through the doorway. His presence had a gravity to it. Not showy. Just undeniable. People instinctively turned when he entered a room. And suddenly, the air shifted. Whispers began almost instantly. "That's Ethan Sterling." "Wait, the Ethan Sterling? From Sterling Equity." "No way, that's her husband?" My mother turned, lips parting just as the music faded. Ethan walked slowly, almost politely, toward her. He didn't greet anyone, didn't smile, just held out a thick envelope, sealed and stamped. "This," he said calmly, his voice low but commanding, "is your pension." Her perfectly painted face froze. Ethan turned toward me. "You ready, sweetheart?" I didn't speak, just nodded once. And the entire room went still, dead silent. No one laughed now. No one whispered. My mother stared at the envelope like it was a live grenade. Blake's mouth twitched. Even Brittany stopped mid-sip. I walked across the room with Ethan beside me. My heels didn't echo, but it felt like every step I took cracked the silence a little more. No one stopped us. No one dared. At the doorway, I turned back. My voice was steady, soft, but it cut through the tension like glass. "Congratulations on your retirement, Mom," I said. "Now you work for me." And with that, we walked out. But this wasn't how it started. No, that story began long before anyone knew my name. And it didn't start with kindness. It started with shame, with betrayal, with a family that never believed in me, with a woman they crushed, until she decided to rise without asking for permission. The rain came down hard that night. Ethan drove in silence, one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting gently over mine. I stared out the window, the city lights blurring behind the streaks of water. I wasn't crying. I didn't need to anymore. "I can't believe she said that," Ethan muttered, breaking the silence. Not even a whisper of pride. I shook my head slightly. She's never been proud of me. Not when I got into Columbia. Not when I opened the firm. Not even when you... I paused, then smirked faintly. "Well, when you married me." He glanced over. "I didn't marry you to make her proud, Madison." I turned toward him fully then. "I know. That's why I trust you." He reached the parking garage, pulling into our private bay. We rode the elevator up, silence heavy but not uncomfortable. We stepped into the penthouse, where city lights spilled in from the glass walls, casting long shadows across the marble floor. I kicked off my heels slowly and walked to the window. How long are you going to let them think I'm a failure? Ethan asked, his voice careful but pointed. I smiled to myself. Not much longer. Because the truth was, my mother didn't just retire from teaching. She'd retired from being head of the very nonprofit that I now secretly owned through a shell trust. Every decision that kept her name afloat in recent years had come from me, signed under aliases, rerouted through Ethan's people, and executed silently. She never once questioned where the money was coming from. That nonprofit was now being restructured, and its new leadership would be announced tomorrow. And she wasn't going to like it. 3 years ago, I was working 14-hour days at a law firm that barely respected me. My mother told people I was still trying to find herself. My brother used to say, "Madison's smart, she just doesn't follow through." My father, God rest his passive, quiet soul, never defended me. But I didn't crumble. I built. Quietly. At night, I studied contracts, taught myself finance, and slowly started acquiring small struggling companies. Ethan had helped, not by giving money, but by challenging me. Don't build something that needs me, he'd said. Build something that doesn't. So I did. And now, the woman who raised me with snide remarks and backhanded compliments was financially tied to a structure I fully controlled. I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom. But sometimes they looked the same. The next morning, I dressed differently. No soft sweaters. No neutral tones. I wore a sharp navy blue pantsuit, heels that clicked like authority, and a silver pendant Ethan gave me when I closed my third acquisition. "You sure you want to go?" he asked, pouring coffee. I took it with a smirk. She made me come to her party. I think it's only fair I make her come to mine. The boardroom was glass-walled, modern, sleek, and packed with curious faces. My mother sat near the back, holding her handbag tightly, clearly confused. "Welcome, everyone," the host said. "Today we'd like to announce the transition of leadership for the Grey Hope Foundation." She perked up, lips parting. "After thorough restructuring, we're proud to introduce the foundation's new sole trustee and executive chair, Madison Lynn Sterling." There it was. The gasp. My mother's mouth opened like a wound. I stood and walked to the front, each step slow, deliberate. I took the mic, met her gaze, and said, "It's nice to see so many familiar faces, especially my mother's. After all, this foundation wouldn't exist if not for her." There was a pause, and then I smiled, because of how badly she ran it into the ground. You could have heard a pin drop. My mother stood up so fast her chair screeched across the floor. "This is a joke," she said. Loud. Too loud. "This has to be some kind of mistake." I didn't blink. "No mistake, Margaret." She flinched. "I never called her that. Only Mom. But not today." I turned to the board and continued. Over the last year, the Grey Hope Foundation was quietly acquired through a series of third-party restructures and debt consolidations. It was bankrupt, technically, until I stepped in. A man from the finance committee cleared his throat. "You saved it?" "Yes," I replied, locking eyes with my mother. "I rebuilt it, with my own hands, with no help from this woman who said, what was it at her retirement party? She's the only one who never achieved anything?" The silence tightened like a noose. My mother tried to recover. "You can't. You don't understand the mission of this foundation. I've spent my life running it into the ground." I cut in sharply. "And taking credit for others' work. You promoted your friends. You cut programs for underprivileged girls because it didn't look polished enough. You misused grant funds and buried the audits." Several board members began whispering. "You're bluffing," she spat. I nodded at Ethan, who stepped forward from the back. He handed me a folder. I opened it, flipped through a few pages, then held up a color printout. It was her signature, next to a date. An approval for a shady contractor that billed the foundation 3 times the standard rate. The room went deadly quiet again. "I didn't know," she started. "You didn't care," I said. "That's always been your flaw." She sank back into her chair, face pale. I turned back to the board. "We are done with nepotism. We are done with selective charity. Under my leadership, This foundation will rebuild its soul. After the meeting, I walked out into the cold air, the wind catching my coat like wings. You didn't have to destroy her, Ethan said quietly as he came up beside me. I gave him a look. I didn't. I just showed everyone who she really is. She destroyed herself. He nodded slowly. So what now? I go home, I said, and write the next chapter. That night, I pulled out an old box from the closet. Inside it were pictures, me as a child, forgotten trophies, acceptance letters to universities that were never framed. My mother never kept them on the fridge. Only Blake's achievements got magnets. Mine went into storage. I held them in my lap, felt the weight of them. The lost years. The years I begged for her approval, foolishly. Then I burned them. Not out of hate. Out of closure. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from my mother. Not a call. Just a cold envelope. Inside. Congratulations on the acquisition. I don't understand how you managed it, but I suppose I underestimated you. You've clearly moved on. I won't bother you again. No apology. No remorse. Just control, slipping through her fingers. I smiled. Then I slid the letter into the shredder, without a word. She was right. I had moved on. And she would never have power over me again. The press got wind of the restructuring faster than I expected. Daughter ousts former director in silent coup. Margaret Lynn quietly replaced after shady audits leak. Who is Madison Sterling? That last one became a headline. A trending search term. A hashtag. I didn't chase it. But I didn't run from it either. Instead, I focused on rebuilding the foundation. We reopened the programs my mother had cut. This time, we didn't use buzzwords or empty slogans. We used action. We brought in youth counselors, trauma specialists, and real educators instead of shiny boardroom figureheads. I sat with girls in shelters. I listened to their stories. One of them, Jada, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "They said I was trash." I gripped her hand. So did mine. And they were dead wrong. Back at home, Ethan was deep into a new deal with venture capitalists in San Francisco, but he never missed a single dinner. We sat on the balcony overlooking the skyline, wine glasses in hand, watching the lights flicker like stars below. "You know what you did, right?" he said one night, leaning back. "What?" "You shattered a legacy and replaced it with one you built from the ground up." I exhaled slowly. And I didn't do it with vengeance. I did it with purpose. But part of me still felt hollow. Because my mother didn't say sorry. She didn't even fight me. And somehow, that stung more. Then one day, I got a call. From Blake. My brother. I hadn't heard from him since the party. Since the moment he saw me walk out on Mom's arm in arm with Ethan while the room stared in stunned silence. "Hey," he said, awkward and slow. "I was wondering if we could meet." I blinked. "Why?" "Because I think I owe you more than an apology." We met at a diner on the edge of town, neutral territory. I found him already there, hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee, eyes tired in a way I hadn't seen before. He stood when I walked in. That was new. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I'm listening," I said. He nodded slowly. "I was jealous. My whole life. You never begged for attention. Never tried to please them. You just disappeared. I thought it meant you were weak. But you were building something while I was chasing Dad's approval like a dog chasing a car." I didn't interrupt. And then I saw Ethan walk in at that party, and I knew you'd passed us all, and none of us even noticed. There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Maddie." My throat tightened slightly. I didn't cry, but I did whisper, "Thank you." He leaned in. "She's drinking more. Alone. She talks like she still runs things." "I don't wish her pain," I said quietly. "But I won't save her from the mirror she broke." Later that night, I stood outside on the patio, wind brushing through my hair. Ethan came up behind me, arms wrapping around my waist. "Everything okay?" he murmured. "Yeah," I whispered, just wondering how many versions of me had to die before I became this one. He didn't speak for a moment, then said, "Every one of them was necessary. But fate wasn't done with me yet. because a few days later, I received a box. No return address. Inside, a photo of my mother,
crying,
sitting on the front steps of her empty home. And a single note. She has nowhere left to go. She finally said your name. I folded the paper slowly and walked to the phone. I stared at the phone for a long time. Not ringing, not vibrating, just waiting. Ethan came in quietly, towel around his neck, fresh from a workout. What's wrong? I held up the note. It's from someone who saw her. He sat beside me, eyes scanning the photo. Your mom? She lost the house, I murmured. Probably defaulted on the mortgage after the donations dried up. The press didn't mention it, but someone wanted me to know. Are you going to call her? I looked at him. My voice came low, steady.
No.
But I did drive by. 3 days later. Midnight. I didn't get out. Just parked across the street and stared. There she was, sitting alone on a folding chair outside a rundown motel in Queens. She looked smaller, like the wind could carry her away. She wasn't crying now. She was just still. And for the first time, I didn't see her as a monster. I saw her as a woman who couldn't let go of a script where she was always the hero, even when she wasn't. Back home, I lit a candle in my office and pulled out a blank notebook. I wrote, "This is not a revenge story. This is a resurrection. This is for every woman told she's too quiet, too soft, too unsure, until she speaks with results and silence follows. This is for me." A year passed. The foundation bloomed under our new leadership. We doubled programs, hired women who'd aged out of the system, started a scholarship in my mother's maiden name. That part was important to me, not because she earned it, but because the name deserved to be remembered for something better. One day, during a staff event, I was speaking to the new interns when I noticed an older woman entering the building, nervously clutching her ID. Gray hair, worn shoes, but unmistakable. Margaret Lynn. I didn't call security. I didn't freeze. I simply watched as she signed in for her volunteer shift. Later that afternoon, our paths crossed by the community kitchen. She turned, startled, then quickly looked down. I waited. She opened her mouth,
closed it,
and finally whispered, "I don't expect forgiveness." I nodded. That's good, because I don't give it. I live it. She blinked back tears. "I still remember what I said at that party," she murmured, "and how you stood there and smiled." "I wasn't smiling at you," I said calmly. "I was smiling because you didn't know who I was anymore." She wiped her eyes. And now, I looked around at the busy center, the young women laughing, counselors helping a mother soothe her child. Now, I don't care if you ever figure it out. That night, Ethan and I danced in our living room. No music, just movement. His hands steady on my waist, my head against his chest. "Do you feel free?" he asked softly. I nodded. And heavy, in the best way. "You didn't just win, Maddie," he said. "You changed everything." "No," I whispered. I finally stopped trying to prove something to people who never wanted to see me. That was the only chain left. I didn't burn her picture. I framed it, hung it in my office. Not out of love, not out of spite,